Hello and a very warm welcome to an India Today special broadcast that comes to you from Banff in Canada. I'm Gaurav Sawant. This is where the G7 summit is happening at Kananaskis. There are several world leaders who are here. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be having a series of interactions with world leaders, including the President of Ukraine, with the Prime Minister of Canada, with the Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, and with the President of Germany. But with the Chancellor of Germany? But what's extremely interesting, US President Donald Trump, he's left the G7 summit and he's flown back to the United States of America as tensions between Israel and Iran escalate to an all-time high. The latest information is that it appears time for Iran is running out. Will US bombers that are now flying to Diego Garcia base B-2 bombers? They're the only ones with that heavy munition that can target the underground bunkers in Fordo area of Iran. Are they now likely to join this battle? What next? That's our top focus story on this special broadcast.
Fresh explosion across Tehran. Donald Trump exits G7 early. Triggers big speculation.
The program's going to be wiped out long before that. But they're not going to have a nuclear weapon.
Will US bust Iran's key nuke facility? Israel-Iran big escalation coming? Big focus on India first.
There are 3 US aircraft carrier battle group fleets that are also moving into the Indo-Pacific region. 3 aircraft carrier battle groups. What does that indicate? What's on the horizon when it comes to Iran? Because Israel has threatened a massive escalation, and after American President Donald Trump spoke of people asking them to leave Tehran, there is virtually a mass exodus that's taking place. The next 24 to 48 hours remain extremely crucial, and we will get to the latest details. But first, as always, the headlines on India First. Israel warns Iran of significant strikes in Tehran. Iran says Israel will be defeated. Trump takes stock in the White House Situation Room. India's massive evacuation drive in Iran underway. Indian medical students are being taken to safety. 110 students have been escorted now to Armenia. Technical snags ground at least 5 Air India Dreamliners. This after increased scrutiny of Boeing flagship aircraft after the horrific crash last week in Ahmedabad. Unseen video of Air India plane crash emerges. Images show medical hostel students jumping to safety, virtually rappelling down the building on fire. Pre-monsoon showers in the national capital bring relief from the heat wave, but waterlogging in several parts of the national capital. Right now, we are at the Rocky Mountains area, and this is seen as one of the most beautiful parts of Canada. But the conversation, to a very large extent, is all about tensions in Iran and the conflict between Israel and Iran, and whether any efforts can still be made to dial down the tensions. And very clearly, there appears to be massive escalation. Day 5 of the conflict, Israel has been pounding several military locations deep inside Iran, including an Air Force base in the past 24 hours, 2,300 kilometers away from the Israeli border. It's also taken down the top army commander appointed just 4 days ago in Iran. Now, if a general is not safe, and if several top commanders have been neutralized, there are questions that are now being asked: how safe is the supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. But before I come to that, let me get you all the top developments that have been taking place. Top developments in the past 24 hours. Israel has warned of attacks on significant targets in Tehran. Donald Trump's early exit from G7 does indicate that something big is on the cards. US has moved the largest B-2 stealth bomber fleet in the Indian Ocean region at Diego Garcia. 3 US aircraft carriers, USS Nimitz, USS Carl Vinson, and USS Harry Truman, are now being moved to be deployed in the Indo-Pacific. Donald Trump says he hasn't offered any peace plan to Iran. There are no peace talks with Iran. Donald Trump also says he wants Iran to give up its nuclear weapons entirely. General Ali Shamdani, Iran's military chief appointed barely 5 days ago, has been killed. Israel says Khamenei will end up as Saddam Hussein. 2 new explosions have been heard in Tehran. The G7 has issued a statement. It does call for Iran to de-escalate. It also talks about the need for Israel to be in a position to defend itself. So fast-paced developments taking place. Let me quickly get you this report of what's happening on ground, both in Israel and in Iran.
The worst war to engulf West Asia. Iran and Israel continue to pound each other with ferocious firepower in an escalating conflict. The Israeli Air Force is continuing to strike Iran's military targets, including its nuclear and missile sites, with deadly precision. Latest images released by Israel showed strikes on F-14 fighter jets in a Tehran airport, apart from strikes on trucks containing weapons and launchers on the way to Tehran. Israel also hit a truck carrying surface-to-air launchers on the main route between Tehran and Qom. Israel dealt another deadly blow to Iran when it claimed it had killed Iran's top military chief, Ali Shadmani, in an overnight strike. Shadmani is said to be the closest figure to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. His predecessor Hossein Salami was killed just days ago by Israel in a similar strike.
Tonight, following accurate intelligence received by the intelligence branch, we eliminated Ali Shadmani, the war chief of staff, the most senior military commander of the Iranian regime. Shadmani only managed to hold the position for 4 days, and we also eliminated him. We will pursue our enemies again and again using advanced intelligence capabilities, exploiting opportunities, air superiority, and complex operational planning.
Israeli fighter jets also launched a wave of targeted airstrikes deep into Iranian territory, including a shocking strike on Iran's state broadcaster headquarters in Tehran during a live transmission. The anchor on air was seen scrambling for cover as fire engulfed the studio. Flames consumed the building, and the aftermath was nothing short of catastrophic. A senior reporter for Iran's IRIB news agency stood outside the burning headquarters with hands stained with blood. The reporter was heard saying that Israel would not achieve anything by this attack and that they will see worse.
This appalling attack constitutes a blatant war crime and a direct assault on press freedom. The Israeli regime has once again demonstrated that it is the foremost enemy of truth. It holds the disgraceful record of being the world's leading perpetrator of violence against journalists and media professionals.
Smoke rised from a highway near Sawant in southwest of Iranian capital Tehran. Large plumes of smoke could be seen in the video as Israeli intensified airstrikes across Iran. Iran too is hitting back with a wave of ballistic missile strikes on Israel. Massive smoke cloud was seen billowing from a site in central Israel's city following an Iranian missile attack. Israeli teams are working to extinguish fire at site after Iranian missile attack. As fighting between Israel and Iran escalates, citizens of both countries have been forced to flee the war zone and take refuge in bomb shelters. Bureau Report, India Today.
Iran too has been in a position to pound several places deep inside Israel, including Tel Aviv and Haifa. But Israel says though it's taken out 1/3 of Iran's ballistic missile launch capabilities, Iran still has a lot of its missiles that can target Israel. And the wave after wave of missile strikes, they've actually been able to overwhelm not just the Iron Dome, the much famed Iron Dome, which of course is a close quarter missile defense shield, but also the Arrow missile defense shield and the larger David Sling system that's been operating all across the region. It's a multi-tiered system, and yet several missiles have succeeded in hitting across. And this is where the role of the US president becomes extremely crucial. Is America all set to play a much bigger role in the next 24 to 48 hours? President Trump, he left this place in Canada. He's back at the Situation Room in Washington, D.C. US B-2 bombers fleet, they've moved to Diego Garcia, and they're the only bombers that have the capability to launch those deep penetration bombs, those heavy bombs that can hit a target 60 meters or 70 meters below the surface of the earth. And further, where Iran still has its nuclear weapons, will the United States directly now get into this conflict? The B-2 bomber fleet and the 3 aircraft carrier battle groups in the Indo-Pacific. What's the signaling? I get you more in this report.
The missiles and bombs striking Iran and Israel are being felt as far away as Canada. With the G7 summit being derailed after US President Donald Trump left early. Donald Trump boarded Air Force One a day earlier than scheduled due to the situation in the Middle East, emphasizing that he wants a real end to the conflict.
What specifically is better than a ceasefire? What are you looking for here?
An end. A real end, not a ceasefire. An end.
So something that would be permanent.
Yeah. Or giving up entirely.
While leaving, he dropped a hint, reiterating that Iran should have signed a nuclear deal with the United States and that Tehran must return to the negotiating table.
Look, Iran should have signed the deal.
If it would help bring Iran to the negotiating table, would you guarantee that the U.S. would not get involved militarily?
Well, I think Iran basically is at the negotiating table. They want to make a deal. And as soon as I leave here, we're going to be doing something.
He had earlier countered Macron's claim that he would negotiate a ceasefire, saying something big is coming.
The Israelis are going to slow down, or are they going to hit the accelerator right now?
Well, we're going to see. You're going to find out over the next 2 days, right? You're going to find out.
In a social media post, he also gave a call asking people to evacuate Tehran, stating that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon.
Thinking on the call for Tehran to evacuate, is there a threat or is there incoming? What was the thinking on the full evacuation?
I want people to be safe, and that's always possible. A thing like that could happen. I just want people to be safe.
Asked if US involvement would destroy Iran's nuclear program, he hinted his hope that Israel would take care of it.
Do you think if the U.S. got involved militarily, it would actually wipe out Iran's nuclear program, or where's your assessment of that?
I hope their program's going to be wiped out long before that.
Trump also warned Iran against daring to strike American assets.
Great people, they know how to protect themselves.
And when you say better, what's
we'll come down so hard if they do anything to our people. We'll come out so hard, then the gloves are off so beautifully. Now, I think they know not to touch our troops.
Regardless of how things play out in West Asia, the President of the United States clearly feels he needs to be on home turf.
You do in Washington that you couldn't do in Canada.
Just be a little bit, I think, more well-versed. Not having to use telephones so much, because I don't believe in telephones. Because people like you listen to them. Yeah. So, being on the scene is much better.
With both Iran and Israel refusing to back down, the world now looks to US and Trump's next action. Will he be able to end the conflict, or will he light the match that will set West Asia on fire? Bureau Report, India Today.
What next? Is West Asia set to explode in a much bigger way? Is peace still? Can it be given an opportunity? Joining me on this broadcast is Dr. Shuki Friedman. Dr. Friedman is the Director General of Jewish People Policy Institute, joins us from Jerusalem. Erwin Van Ween is the Program Lead Middle East and Senior Research Fellow, joins us from Brussels. Daniel Block is Senior Editor, Foreign Affairs Magazine, Contributing Editor to the Washington Monthly, joins us from New York. Avijit Iyer Mitra, Senior Fellow at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies, joins me from Delhi. And with me is my senior colleague, Sandeep Unnithan. Welcome, gentlemen. Dr. Friedman, your appreciation. Donald Trump says just right now you have the B-2 bombers that are being prepared. They're moving to Diego Garcia, 3 aircraft carrier battle groups in the Indo-Pacific. How do you see these developments?
First of all, it's really hard to assess what will Donald Trump decide, but we can, in practice, see what he's doing. We have to remember that he's commander-in-chief. He's the commander of the army of the U.S., and therefore he personally, I assume, confirmed or at least ordered these vessels and planes to go forward to be ready to attack in Iran, around the Middle East and around Iran. So that part of these fighters going to Emir air base, others to Qatar, and there are the Goan's place. So we understand, if you are analyzing the situation, that he's ready to take the decision, and if he takes the decision, he's ready to attack. The U.S. Army is getting ready to join to the attacks against Iran. We have to realize, and we just went out from the shelter now, 10 minutes ago, that in the recent 24 hours, the Iranians are shooting smaller and smaller missiles attacks on Israel. It started with 40 and 50 missiles each time, and now it's 10 or even less. And that means that their capabilities are in decline, and Trump is actually looking close to figure out what the risk would be for his forces around the Middle East. And as he realized that the risk from the capability of the Iranians to attack the bases around the Middle East is in decline and actually shrinking by the Israeli attacks, he is willing to join and to jump in and to actually finish the work.
Daniel Block, is that your appreciation even in New York? Is America likely to directly join this conflict more than just defend Israel from incoming missiles? Are they likely to launch missiles and perhaps at Fordo nuclear facility?
I think the honest answer is we just don't know. I mean, I don't even know if the president himself knows. He's sent so many contradictory signals. On the one hand, he'll tweet out that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon in all caps, and he'll tell everybody to evacuate Tehran. And then the next day he'll say, I want to make a deal. I think Iran is willing to come to the table. I want this war to be over. So there's just so much mixed messaging and mixed signals that we really have no idea right now. It's true that the United States has positioned multiple military assets closer to the conflict, including some that would certainly help carry out a bombing campaign, but that doesn't mean a bombing campaign is going to happen. It does suggest that Trump wants to give himself the opportunity to do that, but I think it's worth dwelling on the domestic politics for Trump, which are very tricky here. His coalition is really divided. So the Democratic Party seems pretty uniformly opposed to the idea of bombing Iran. The Republican Party is split between factions. You have a kind of hawkish, old Republican, George W. Bush style Republican, neoconservatives, neocons as we call them here, that are quite supportive and enthusiastic about the idea of the United States joining the offensive side of this war. But then a lot of Trump Republicans, the kind of Make America Great Again movement, are opposed to this. These are isolationists. They are publicly and outwardly lobbying Trump, in some ways begging him not to get directly involved. So there's a lot of competing pressures on the president, not only internationally, but also domestically here in the States.
But is the situation, as Donald Trump indicated, next 24 to 48 hours, will we know what's happening? Irvin Van Veen, how do you view the developments? Donald Trump leaving G7 here in Canada, watching the situation in the Situation Room in White House. Is America likely to join this battle, and would that be reckless, or will that bring an early close to this war?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, we may start by calling the Israeli attack in itself a fairly reckless move, I think, if we appreciate the fact that the nuclear talks were still going on and Iran had clearly indicated a willingness to stay at the table. Moreover, there was a nuclear deal in 2015 that the US quit, not Iran, of course. So the key issue has clearly been the ability or the permission for Iran to enrich uranium on its own soil, right? So this has been the big sticking points of the talks. And I think the Americans, they see the current wave of Israeli attacks as a way to create tactical leverage to force Iran back to the table and to essentially capitulate on this particular point. The problem here is that Iran has always been very adamant on its right to enrich uranium back home, also under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And it is very difficult to see the Iranian regime backing down on this point. And we should also keep in mind that although Israel has created the conditions in which the US can basically conduct a B-2 bomber run on Fordo, right, and try to annihilate the facility, that Iran has some big response options left that include closing the Persian Gulf, that include hitting some pretty vulnerable US bases in the region. And we should also keep in mind that Hezbollah is down but not out. So it would be a highly risky move, I think, for the Americans to make. And regardless of what they do, it will certainly be a big stimulus for the Iranians to run for the bomb, basically, because they are under attack in a way that was not provoked. And they will be wanting to secure the survival of their regime. So I think we're at a very dangerous point where whatever the Americans decide to do, none of the outcomes look particularly good to me.
Okay, but Abhijit, would the Americans be in a position to bring about a quick end? Did anyone really expect Iran to go down in the manner in which it did? It hasn't folded completely, but one thought that Iran would be able to fight longer and better, or is it still saving its ammunition for a rainy day? Some of our analysts, you heard Dr. Friedman seem to indicate that initially they were firing longer range missiles, bigger volleys of missiles. Some, of course, continue to hit Tel Aviv and Haifa, but the frequency going down, the intensity going down, or do they have more in store?
From what we can tell, almost half their launchers have been destroyed, Gaurav. So, if you don't have the launchers to actually move the missiles, how exactly are you going to go around firing it? When most of your leadership is constantly getting killed on an hourly, if not daily basis, who's going to direct and decide what to hit and things like that? They've had two chiefs of army staff literally within 4 days getting killed. So the attrition is horrendous on the Iranian side. Honestly, I don't think any of us expected to see Iran go down this fast. I mean, when Israel struck Mashhad, which is on the Turkmen-Afghan border almost, they used 3 non-stealth F-16s with 3 external fuel tanks, which is as big a signature, radar signature, as you can possibly imagine. So they're operating in an environment of complete impunity. Now, that said, the problem comes about because of Fordau and the extraction of materials. Fordau, for example, the problematic facility is about, depending on who you talk to, 200 to 300 feet buried under the ground. And that would really require an American GBU-57 strike. Now, the problem with that bomb is it's about 13 tons. 13 tons is way too heavy even for Israel's heaviest fighter, the F-15, to carry. Certainly not on one, hard point.
True.
That's probably going to need the Americans to go in. The second issue is, bombing these facilities isn't enough. If you want to defang Iran, you actually have to extract the fissile material from those things, which is going to require some kind of ground operation. Now, the question is, what will America do? A few of the previous speakers, the opposition to the Americans out there, the internal opposition, comes from the fact that Trump promised no regime change, etc. Which doesn't mean you can't do it quietly, stealthily. I mean, really, it's called a stealth bomber. It can go bomb Fordau without ever being detected. You can provide air support to Israeli ground troops going there, occupying, say, Fordau or Natanz for a month or so, to essentially dig down and extract the material. Because remember, if you do not, they will get to that material, and that can be. It is already at 60% enrichment, which is way over any required civilian
60,
reactor and
yeah.
things like that. I think the real balance out here is between defanging Iran and regime changing Iran. And the problem usually is that, when you're so far ahead of yourself, when you've achieved your war goals way beyond your wildest dreams, there tends to be operational drift. You start, shifting your war goals, and that's a very dangerous place to go down.
Okay, but have they achieved their war games just as yet, or they're still in the process? I want to bring in Sandeep Unnithan. Sandeep, the B-2 bombers are the only aircraft that can carry the GBU-57s to take out further, 90 meters of where that enriched material is. It would require not just an air operation, but also a ground operation. Are there indications this is what is happening right now, or could happen, is likely on the cards in the next 24 to 48 hours?
Well, Gaurav, we really don't know what Donald Trump meant when he said something big was going to come. So we can only guess by looking at the movement of U.S. Fighter jets, the tankers, and carrier battle groups. Now, you mentioned there's one carrier battle group already in the Arabian Sea. That's the Carl Vinson group, and there are two more that are heading there. One of them is the Nimitz carrier strike group. So that's going to be a lot of firepower that's there in the Arabian Sea, plus all the tankers and the B-2 bombers that are already there in Diego Garcia. 6 were moved there in April, and a few more are believed to have flown in. So you're looking at something like a hammer and anvil kind of operation, where the Israeli hammers are, pounding Iran relentlessly over the last 5 days. And in the south, you have the United States moving into Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, moving their carrier strike groups into the Arabian Sea. And of course, you have Diego Garcia right down there, 4,000 kilometers away from Iran, with those GBU-57s that we believe is the only weapon that could knock out the Iranian enrichment facilities in Fordau. Now, it's a very interesting situation, Gaurav. Now, we don't know what the Americans really plan to do with that kind of force levels. Are they trying to prevent any fallout of an Iranian attack on American bases in West Asia? There are something like 50,000 American personnel there, multiple air and sea bases in West Asia. There are something like 9 big air bases there, 9 American bases there. So this is a red line that Iran could cross possibly if it has been pushed to the wall. And Gaurav, Iran is practically on its own. There are only 3 players in the military operations in West Asia right now. One is Israel, which has relentlessly been pounding Iran over the last 5 days. Israeli jets are flying unmolested from Israel all the way up to Iran. It's almost the distance between Mumbai and Delhi, to give an idea to our viewers. They're flying one-way missions that are so long. I mean, 3,000 kilometers up and down is what they're flying, without any threat of ground-based air defenses, which they've of course neutralized on the first day itself. And then you have, Iran, as one of our panelists mentioned, their salvos are reducing over the last couple of days. They don't have the number of launchers. They don't have enough ballistic missiles. Their command and control has been completely disrupted. So Iran weakening as the days pass. They are by themselves. They're fighting by themselves. Israel is, of course, there, but Israel has the support of the United States.
Which brings us to
so
that
it's
big
three
question.
countries in
Which
this,
then brings us to the big
equation.
question, Irvin Van Veen. Yes, that big question right now is, will Israel then directly go after Ayatollah Ali Khamenei? When I put that question to Israel's ambassador to India, Reuven Assar, he said they're only going after military leadership and the IRCG, Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, not going after political leadership. But could that be endgame, a regime change in Israel, in Iran?
Israelis have already gone after people like Ali Shamkhani, who was in the National Security Council and at this moment a civilian. They also went after a number of nuclear scientists. The state TV station was bombed. So it's not just military leaders, I think, that have been targeted so far. And that points to a bigger issue, I think, like one of the other people on the panel said, that this is basically the decapitation strategy that Israel also followed against Hezbollah, right? So to eliminate the civilian and military leadership together with the main military assets, and then to have a free game, basically, which is the situation that they have more or less established at the moment. So the hope is, of course, that there will be some sort of domestic opposition rising up from all the chaos. And the problem with that is, of course, that the opposition in Iran is weak and very fragmented, like you might expect in an authoritarian regime that has had no compunction to repress its population to the extent necessary to stay in power. So frankly speaking, for the moment, there is no alternative. Iran has a modern bureaucracy, a modern army, with a clear line of succession and a huge talent pool. So I think the strategy of decapitation is a little different in its impact than compared to groups like Hamas or Hezbollah, who have much smaller cadres. But it's true that Iran allowed itself to be surprised, and Israeli intelligence has been top-notch. So we will have to wait and see how that pans out exactly.
What's the end game, Dr. Friedman, that Israel has in mind? A regime change, taking out nuclear capabilities entirely, and in your appreciation, will Fordow then be the next target? Because Isfahan and Natanz have been targeted many times. So is Fordow the only place left to be targeted and ensure a regime change?
First of all, we have to be aware that the Israeli Air Force achieved a complete freedom of action above all Iran. So it buys the time getting all the targets and working constantly and determinedly to achieve the targets of eliminating the missile capabilities, the missiles launching capabilities, and the nuclear weapon program. We started in Natanz, continue in other locations, and the next would be Fordow. Hopefully, in my perspective, the American will join, but even the American would not join to this effort. Israel has the capability, and when there is no disruption from anti-L activities from the Iranian side, to just what we call drilling in Fordow, so we don't have the 30,000 tons bombs. We have a smaller one, but if you constantly hit the same place by smaller bombs, you can at least have some achievements in destroying this facility as well. So basically, this might be achievable. And furthermore, I don't think that the target is now eliminating the regime, but it might be a consequence to what we are doing to its leadership and to symbols of the regime in Tehran.
Okay. Daniel Block, given the way you've had various statements coming from Donald Trump, as you pointed out, some of them are contradictory. There is an email or a message from the Israeli American ambassador to Israel to Donald Trump that's going viral on social media. Messages like this, are they likely to impact whatever decision Donald Trump takes, because if he sees himself as someone who survived that assassination attempt for a bigger goal in mind, that there's a bigger aim in his life, is this what that could be, as many in America are speculating?
Well, first, I just want to respond to something another one of the panelists said earlier about the stealth bombing capabilities of the United States. I just want to be clear, if the United States begins a major bombing campaign against Iran, even a bombing campaign to just take out its deeply buried nuclear sites, that will be news. It will not be kept a secret. The United States may try and deny it, but because it's the only country with the capability to do that, it is something that Americans will know about. They will know that Washington has done that. Now, whether that actually constrains Trump, maybe not. In fact, I'm personally skeptical that that fact would, and it's absolutely true. The political blowback would be a lot less significant than if there is a major regime change operation that the United States undertakes. That is a very meaningful and significant difference. Now, whether the United States and Trump specifically is listening to Israel, it's hard to say. I mean, the mixed messaging gets caught up in this as well. To what extent is he being played by Netanyahu, being rolled by Netanyahu, just simply going along with what Netanyahu says? It's really hard to tease out the signal from the noise. I think what is important to keep in mind in terms of conversations about regime change versus just a bombing campaign is that if the goal is to get rid of Iran's nuclear program, you wind up on a slippery slope path pretty quickly, because there's really only a couple of options. If there's not a nuclear deal, if the two sides can't come to an agreement, even if the United States takes out Iran's deeply buried nuclear facilities, most estimates suggest that that would set back the nuclear program by a few years at absolute best. In which case you wind up in a situation where if you want to get rid of Iran's nuclear program for good, you really only have a few options. One is to continuously bomb its nuclear facilities every few years in a quote unquote mowing the lawn type of situation, which you may not even be able to do. They may harden them further, and that may become impossible. Or you strike a nuclear deal, or you attempt a regime change operation. So all of these options involve shall we say, pretty intensive efforts by the United States one way or another, with the diplomatic one still being, I think, the most feasible option if, you can still have some kind of agreement. But it's certainly true, based on what Israel's saying, that they're trying to drag the United States into this conflict. They're trying to get the United States to join its bombing rate. I think that's been the plan since they've started, because they know they can't get rid of the nuclear program themselves.
Which is true, because all their efforts so far, Dr. Friedman, and let me bring in Abhijit Iyer Mitra first, and then you can respond to him, Dr. Friedman. Abhijit, all their best efforts, they've succeeded so far, and spectacularly by some accounts, when it comes to Isfahan and Natanz. But for Fordo, they will require the American support to tunnel in 60 meters deep or 90 meters deep, as some argue. Or is there merit in Dr. Friedman saying repeated bombing raids, now that they have complete air supremacy or superiority? Even if it doesn't take one bomb, they could do it again and again and again and again and achieve the same aim.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Okay, you're on mute, Abhijit. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
okay.
Strength 5. Go on, sir.
So, the thing is, you can absolutely do a mowing the lawn kind of action. There are two possibilities out here. One is, Israel, for example, has been at war for the last, 2-3 years now, since the October 7th attack. And you don't see any sign of attrition or exhaustion of the Israelis. If anything, they've grown much stronger. The kind of capability surprise we've seen in the attack on Iran is truly mind-boggling. If anything, you would pretty much say that Israel has grown stronger. On the other hand, what we've seen with Iran is not just even a long-term decline of capability. Last year, from I think was it October or November last year, when they launched a few hundred ballistic missiles at Israel, to now, every day you're seeing the reduction of capability. So maybe Iran has attrited to the point where recovery would be very, very long, very, very painful, and a mowing operation would be easier. I don't know. Maybe it'll be tougher. Really depends. The second problem here is, I don't think Iran has still understood what a big blunder 7th of October was. There was no need for Hezbollah to get involved in that. Hezbollah chose to get involved in it. Hezbollah virtually got decapitated in that. Because of Hezbollah decapitating, the Syrian government effectively fell. We have several statements by the Syrian opposition saying the only reason they were able to defeat Assad was because of the Hezbollah's dramatic collapse of Hezbollah in that sense. So when you start using your proxies, the ring of fire it created to fight the far enemy, collapsing so rapidly like dominoes, you don't really have that kind of capability. Takes up a long time to build. The third issue has been, for a very long time, Iran has two militaries, effectively the military, and then the IRGC military, which was kind of a sort of, look, no analogy is perfect, but think of it almost as a coup-proofing attempt. And the problem was the more and more sub-conventional actions became important in Iran's military set, more importance was paid to the IRGC part of the military than the proper military. And you've seen what happens with two parallel militaries running the country. Finally, fourth, somebody brought up diplomacy. Tell me, Gaurav, where has diplomacy worked in this situation? The JCPOA was a good deal, but the problem was it only delayed the inevitable by about 15, 20 years. It wasn't a defanging. True, Trump shouldn't have probably cancelled the JCPOA, sorry, such a tongue twister, for what it was worth. But, we can't relive history. If what happened, happened. The problem is the Iranians were playing tough. Now they're offering, flexibility just to stop the bombing. I don't think the Israelis are looking for flexibility to stop the bombing. They're looking for defanging to stop the bombing. So I don't see a diplomatic window out here as of now.
So let me put that question to Irwin Van Ween, whether Israel would be in a position, or Israel and America together will be in a position to completely defang, if I may, use the words that you did, Abhijit, completely defang Iran. Because Iran insists it wants capabilities to be able to enrich uranium for civilian use in their own country and not overseas and bring it over. Will Iran relent on that point, sir?
Well, the defanging point, i.e., the complete destruction of Iran's nuclear program, is very difficult to answer, I think. That's because Iran is a big country. The nuclear knowledge is widely disseminated. There may be production facilities that we don't even know of. They were talking just a few weeks ago about opening another hardened facility even deeper underground. So there are all sorts of scenarios to consider here. And I think the general opinion among much of the expert community used to be that, even if the Israeli-US campaign would be tremendously successful, then the regime could still, nuclearize or weaponize its nuclear capability only a few years from now. So that brings us back to some of the other suggestions that have been made, right? What are you going to do in the long term? Even if you take out the nuclear program today, and take into account the fact that the credibility of the US as a negotiator has been shredded, of course, on the global stage, because it was talking to Iran, and at the same time it greenlighted the preparations for this attack, which have unfolded in parallel, right? You don't prepare plans like this on a Friday afternoon. So it's very unlikely that the Iranian regime will want to go back to the negotiating table, and they will only do that if they feel their very survival is at stake. But I think we are pretty far from that point. And we should bear in mind that the absorption capability of Iran is significantly higher than that of both Israel and the US, for the simple fact that the regime cares a lot less about its citizens. So there is a lot of unexpected ways in which this could still turn before we talk about things like regime change in the context of the experience of places like Iraq and Afghanistan, for example, where that has not worked.
very clearly, or the new regime in Syria, regime change operations often lead to a situation, Dr. Friedman, when the new regime is worse than what existed. So, is regime change, getting rid of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, ultimately what Israel has in mind? And if so, is there a plan B? Who replaces this Ayatollah's regime?
So, first of all, it's
Dr. Friedman, again, you're on mute, sir.
yeah, it's important to realize that the
Go on, sir.
history of Israel and also the US and other countries teach us that it's very hard to get a regime change as you planned it. We've went through it in Lebanon and other places as well, and our experience is that you hardly can have a real influence on what the people will choose. Iranians are smart people, they have a long tradition and experience as different regimes, and then it's really hard to assess what would be the fallback, what would be the other regime that will rise after this one. And I don't think Israel have any ambition to have an influence on the next regime. But, and this is the important thing, this regime is, I don't think there is many other worse regimes in the world in a manner of keeping human rights and interrogating its population and have a negative influence on the region and on the world. You have to remember that this regime have messianic ambitions to export the revolution and to have an influence on the Middle East. And we have to remember that in Yemen, in Iraq, and in Syria and Lebanon, this regime actually builds proxies and develops the capabilities of the proxies, not just against Israel, but also against the locals. And we have seen tremendous disasters in Yemen and in Iraq and in Syria that been actually have motivated by the Iranian regime. And we've seen other locations around the world in Africa where the Iranians are trying to have a negative influence. So I don't see a worse regime than this one.
What happens in the next 24 to 48 hours remains extremely crucial and very critical. I want to thank all my guests for joining me on this special broadcast. Will America directly join that bombing raid on places like Fordo to take out Iran's nuclear capabilities in its entirety? And is that even doable? We debate that, but there's one picture that's going absolutely viral. There's a video that was taken on board a flight from Dubai where an Iranian missile is seen targeting Israel. Now, my colleague Sandeep Unithan explains why some of this is extremely, extremely dangerous. Take a look.
The Israel-Iran war is one of the most bizarre conflicts of all time possibly. You have two countries that are over 1,000 kilometers away, which are at war. That's Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Israel. And right down here you have the Houthis in Yemen who are firing ballistic missiles at Israel. They are Iranian proxies. And of course, Iran has been firing several ballistic missiles at Israel. Israel has been striking at Iran with fighter jets. But Iran's primary weapon is the ballistic missile. And what we've seen in the last couple of days is several passenger airliners that appear to be at risk because ballistic missiles have been fired near them. Now, there have been two such recent instances, one over Israel where a ballistic missile was fired near a passenger airliner. Israeli authorities said that they had protected that civilian airliner by shooting down that ballistic missile. And there was another instance where passengers flying over somewhere here near the Persian Gulf picked up Iranian ballistic missiles going over Iran towards Israel. So how safe are passenger airliners when ballistic missiles are being fired? You know, you had 11 years back, that very tragic case of MH17, which is a Malaysian airliner which was shot down by a Ukrainian missile that killed nearly 298 passengers. It's a very sad story where this MH17 was flying over Ukraine when a surface-to-air missile was launched and that airliner was shot down. So our airliners here in this particular region of West Asia, in this Israel-Iran conflict, are they at risk? Well, not quite, because if you understand the kind of missiles that are being used by Iran to target Israel or by the Houthis to target Israel, it's a very different kind of a missile from the one that was fired at MH17 in 2014. Now, MH17, a passenger airliner, was shot down by a surface-to-air missile. Now, a surface-to-air missile is a missile which has an active seeker, it has an explosive payload, and it's only designed to target aircraft by exploding close to them. When they fly close to this aircraft, they explode near the aircraft, they destroy the aircraft. But what ballistic missiles essentially are, they are weapons that fly out of the ground and in most cases exit the atmosphere and then re-enter and drop onto their target. So, for instance, if you have a civilian airliner that was passing in the vicinity of a ballistic missile, the chances of it being hit by a ballistic missile are extremely rare, are it's almost impossible for a ballistic missile to target an aircraft, because the primary target of a ballistic missile is not the aircraft. It is arcing towards its target, which is usually on the ground. It's a ground-based target. It's being launched. It's a ground-to-ground missile. And typically an airliner would be flying at a speed of over 700 kilometers per hour. That's about 0.7 Mach. It's quite fast. The chances are that you would possibly see these ballistic missiles being fired. You could see the trajectory of these missiles from your window if you're lucky, but it's never happened in the history of conflict that a ballistic missile has brought down a passenger airliner. Of course, you have surface-to-air missiles doing that in conflict areas. This is not to say that passenger airliners are completely safe in war zones. They're not. That's one of the reasons that Iran has closed its airspace now. There are no aircraft flying over there. That's because they want to make sure that they target only military aircraft, the Israeli military aircraft that are coming in. But for the airliners that are flying around of this place where the airspace has been shut, they only are in danger if the weapon that's fired at them is a surface-to-air missile and not a ballistic missile. So ballistic missiles generally leave aircraft alone because they have a target to hit on the ground and they can't do anything to passenger airliners that are flying. They don't have the ability to explode in the proximity of a passenger airliner. Their targets are on the ground, whereas it's very different if, for instance, a surface-to-air missile or a SAM was fired against a passenger airliner. But that's not to suggest that passenger airliners should be flying anywhere near conflict zones. And this is what happens the minute there's a conflict zone that's declared. You have civilian airliners, all of them staying wide away from all of these conflicts. They don't want to make the mistake that was made many years back when Malaysian airliner went down, killing almost 300 passengers.
And I want to take you to Washington, D.C. Field Marshal Asim Munir, Pakistan's army chief, is currently in the United States of America. And just look at the manner in which he's being heckled. He's been called a coward. He's been called a mass murderer. He's been called a person who's stolen democracy. These are all workers of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. They say they're on public property. Listen in to how they're hitting out in a very big way at Asim Munir.
I'm out. Shame on you, Asim Munir. Shame on you. I have freedom of... Assam needs Shame on you, mass murderers! Shame on you! Shame on you, mass murderers! Shame on you! Shame on you, mass murderers! Shame on you!
Shame on you, mass murderer. That's what people of Pakistani origin are calling Asim Munir in the United States of America. These are all supporters of Imran Khan, who remains in jail. Will there be an uprising against Asim Munir? Well, remains to be seen. We'll be tracking that story very closely. But that is all I have for you on this India First special broadcast from Canada. Many thanks for watching. News and updates continue on India Today. Stay with us.